Hello, and welcome to the Pro Series Conversations from CheckBox Pro. My name is Missy, and I'm the founder of CheckBox Pro, where we help school leaders become their most efficient and effective selves by matching them with ed-focused executive assistants. Each member of our team has over 10 years of experience in the education sphere, and though we may consider ourselves pros in some areas, we can't be an expert in every area. This is why we are excited to bring folks working in the education space to offer tools, tips, and insights to make the life of a school leader even more sustainable. Today, my guest is Elizabeth Simpson. With over 15 years in education at the elementary, middle, and high school levels, Elizabeth has founded and led a high-performing charter school in Memphis, Tennessee, and led transformation efforts as a school leader in Washington, D.C. and Charlotte, North Carolina. She most recently founded Compass Collegiate Academy in Charleston, South Carolina, currently a K-4 elementary school on a mission to prove what is possible in public education. Ms. Simpson holds a BA in sociology from the University of Richmond and an MS in special education from the University of Memphis. I have personally worked under her leadership, and she is a force to be reckoned with. She brings a strength and confidence into every interaction, which is invaluable when you are at the helm of a school. In addition to being a school leader, she finds time to play water polo, go to the beach, work out, and chase her dogs and two little boys around with the help of her husband, Tim. Elizabeth, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Missy.
It's so good. Okay, so I really like doing these interviews because I get to do a bit of sleuthing and learn some things about my guests that I didn't know before. So even guests like you who have known since 2012, when I worked under your leadership at Grizzlies Prep, which is just feels like eons ago. So Elizabeth, I did not realize that when you founded Grizzlies Prep in 2011. Yeah, I guess that's when you plan. No, did it open in 2011 or 2012?
I think
2012.
2012? I don't remember.
Yes, it was 2012. But I guess you were kind of working on it and toward, probably in some parts in 2011. But anyways, you at that point were like only into like year 5 of working in education.
Yep.
Year 5. Like that's nothing in the grand scheme of things.
5 years. Yes.
Yeah. So yet, like, again, I can say this because I worked under you. Like you led as if you were someone who had been in education for decades, right? Like you had this, like I said, you had this confidence, you just had this will to get things done. But let's again still remember that you're only 5-ish years into working in education. So my first question is, why? Like, why did you want to start Grizzlies Prep? And how did you feel equipped and ready to found a school after just 5 short years in education?
I fell completely backwards into founding Grizzlies Prep. So I had interviewed to be a teacher coach because I had been a department chair most recently and really enjoyed working with a lot of the newer teachers on my grade level team and helping them develop the skills that they needed to be effective in their classrooms and be the teacher they wanted to be. So I had applied I'd applied to Memphis Teachers Residency in Memphis and went through, I think, 2 full-day interviews and thought things were going really well. And at the end of the second day, they kind of gave me a pat on the head and handed me a t-shirt and said, "We really like you, but we're not going to give you a job." And I was like, I mean, that's your decision. I was a little shocked. But I was looking to come back to Memphis because Tim, my now husband, had a clerkship there. So I told him, I was like, "Hey, I don't have a job yet, but I'm still looking." And then I just got a call from some of the board members at Grizz, and they said, "Hey, we're looking for a school leader." And they just started talking to me about it. And at one point they said, "Do you even want this? We never even asked you. Like, is this what you want to do?" And I kind of thought to myself, thinking of like the other school leaders that I'd worked with, I'm like, well, if these people can do it, like certainly I can too. Like, what makes them any different than me? And I worked under people who had less experience than I had in education. So I thought, well, why not? Like, if all these other people can do it, why can't I do it too? So I said, sure, and was really excited to have the opportunity to train with Building Excellence schools as well and go visit a lot of great schools, which I think helped definitely helped me have a strong sense of direction and like know what I wanted. I was also 26 and very well aware of that and understood that like if I didn't present with confidence, then like people weren't going to take me seriously. And a lot of people didn't take me seriously. I mean, I had many interactions where they're like, yeah, I want to talk to the school leader or the principal. And I was like, yeah, that's me.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, no, the principal. And I was like, you're talking to her. And they're like, yeah, no, but the principal. And I was like,
Yeah.
told you twice. Don't know what to tell you again.
Shh. Now, did you find that to be more from families? Did you find that to be from like community members when you're trying to engage, just different? I mean, like obviously we were partner with the, Memphis Grizzlies, and so there was a lot of happening there. Did you find that with, when you're trying to engage donors? Like what did that look like? And because yeah, you were a baby. Like, I mean, you were, but we were.
We were all really young.
We were
I mean,
all
our
really
whole
young.
team, we didn't have any people over 30 probably.
Not much. Yeah.
So I think it was more from strangers that I'd get that from than I
Yeah.
would anybody else.
Yeah.
Like, someone coming to the door and looking for the principal and I just didn't fit their schema.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd like be out at a social space and they'd be like, what do you do? And I'm like, I'm the principal. Oh, great. What do you teach? Like I lead the school. What do you teach?
Oh my God. How frustrating. But you know what? Well, here's the deal. You proved them wrong because you were highly effective, and Grizzlies Prep under your leadership showed that. So we were ranked one of the or top 5% of all public schools in Tennessee during the 13-14 school year. So that would have been just our second year as a school. You managed to recruit and hire great talent. No, but but you found some who were really loyal to the mission and vision of the organization. I mean, heck, like one of those founding teachers you hired is still working there to this day. Shout out to Alex Iberg, like still holding down the fort, believes in the school that you built, having all boys. Like it really resonated with him, and he's still there. So that being said, it was such a sad day, but you ended up leaving Grizzlies Prep because your husband correct me if I'm wrong, got his dream job in DC. And I know that was a hard transition for you. It obviously was a hard transition on like Grizzlies Prep community, but ultimately, right, like the right decision for your family at the time. And in DC, you were hired on as a high school principal at a charter school. So I'm curious, like, can you describe for us the differences or challenges and rewards between founding a school and stepping into a leadership role in an established institution?
Yeah. One of the things I love about founding is just the ability to build that team from the ground up. So, like, you hire everybody yourself. Like, all the people who are there are your people. And there's such power in the hiring process and conveying the mission and the values of your school. There's coming into an organization, there are a lot of things that are already established. Like when you're in startup, I mean, it's like stuff can hit the fan at any second and go really sideways. Like you have to be okay in the space of like, this all might come crashing down. And there are like 6 small variables that could all take us down right now. But like, you can't let that get to you. You just have to keep like, you know, finding a way and making it work. Whereas when you go into an established organization, like a lot of those things are already in place. Like there are already systems and structures and, the school is an established organization. And so it's not often that you go into something that's established and have the same sort of like everything is in flux. And if I don't make the right moves as a leader, or my team doesn't make the right moves, like things might go sideways really fast and the school might not exist. So being a part of an established organization is great because you already have those things, but coming in new, you have to learn those things. And very rarely is there actually a roadmap or playbook for how the organization works and who to go to for what and how you get things done and who holds what previous relationships or clout or decision-making power within the organization, and just trying to figure out the structure of all of that, especially one that's a very different size with very different resources, can be really challenging.
Yeah. I only know this on a small level, but it's interesting that you say that of just like how you have the humility to come in and be a learner for a little bit while also still balancing the fact that you have an authority. And I experienced that when I actually came back from maternity leave, right? Like there was a like I had known and built a lot of those structures and systems, but then I left for 12 weeks. And then people took it over and tweaked maybe in some positive ways, but just did things differently. And then I came back in and I had to have some moments of just like, let me just observe, right? Like, let me just figure this out. Because if I try to come back in and take everything back on or to change things back to the way they were, or not potentially like give people the space to explain like why this is working and why we have things in place now, it got pushed back, and and so it's an interesting balance to try to like find your footing in a new place. And so, well, that's cool. Okay. Um, okay, so then after this DC job, you ended up moving to Charlotte, which you were in DC for a couple years, maybe two-ish years. Okay. Then you end up moving to Charlotte for a bit, where you led at the middle school level. So now we're back into middle school world. Um, and then you were back in DC for another 2 years, but there you came back more as like I have a note, like a consultant, assistant principal, instructional coach, but for Achievement Prep, which is is it a pretty big network? I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. So tell us a little bit about those transitions and maybe what are some of the things that you might have picked up along the way that ultimately, once we get to, Compass Collegiate here in a little bit, might have equipped you for the next phase of your career.
Yeah, I think every school community that I was a part of was really different, and I had very different lessons learned in each one. After founding, I was like, okay, well, I founded a school, and I was really curious to kind of get into like what does school transformation and school change look like.
Yeah.
Um, and so my next three roles were all kind of in very different elements of that. Um, and I think when I came into Charlotte, I had this idea of like, if I'm principal, like I can change all these things. And that was a good lesson. And that like that's not necessarily the case. And that's not really how that works all the time, depending on how schools are structured. Um, and so there were a lot of other factors, and that can happen with any school. Like principals from one school to another have very different levels of autonomy. And then there's just a lot of learning you have to do about the inner workings of the organization to figure out like how does change happen? And then even though with change, you have a lot of people who want change, but change is uncomfortable. So like they might want it, but they don't really want how it feels, and they don't
Yeah.
really want that pathway to get there. And so navigating that is really challenging, especially if you're someone coming in as new. Who you don't have those relationships yet. So I think just like having those relationships is so critical, and getting to know your people, and then also just like having the resources. I think that's the other piece of, in education, we're so regularly under-resourced and oftentimes don't always have the tools that we might need, even though we have a lot of skills and a lot of talent. Don't always have the tools that we need, whether those are financial, whether those are, physical and just the building space. There's so many variables that need to be aligned to make a school work well.
Yeah.
And so I think I got a good feel for all of that. And then going back to DC, I was in an environment where the school had just undergone a lot of change and was continuing to go through a lot of change. And I have a lot of respect for that school leader and CEO. Learned a lot from Chantel Wright when I was founding Grizz. When Achievement Prep was really like in its heyday. And then they went through a lot of change and taking on more schools, getting a lot of grants, absorbing an entirely new school, opening elementary, and then seeing seeing the impact of that, in both ways that were really great and ways that were really challenging. And so being a part of that on their leadership team, I filled in many different ways. And I was also on maternity during that time as well. So and then it was during COVID. So there's just a lot of flex and transition, but I did everything from instructional coaching to assistant principaling to consulting to leading at the network level, and was just eager to step in and support in whatever way I could and use my talents in whatever way they needed me.
Yeah. I guess, okay, and I mean, I think you've kind of answered it, but I want to be a little bit more on the nose because I should have asked this question earlier, which you used this term like transformation, with like, there's founding and leading, but like you're specifically, there's this element of like, I mean, fill in for me, right? Like this transformational schools or what's the term I need to call it? Am I using that term correctly? Right? Like transformation efforts is I think is kind of what your bio was talking about. So what specifically is that term when it comes to schools that maybe our listeners aren't as familiar with, myself included?
Can you ask that again?
Yes. So transformation, like you're saying, like transformation efforts.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to schools, so
So there's something going on in a school and someone wants that thing to change, right? So maybe it's like student achievement.
okay.
Maybe it's teacher retention. Maybe it's 9 times out of 10, it's student achievement, right? Or it's
Yeah.
student, or it's staff culture. I think those are the biggest things. But basically, someone is saying, we don't like how this is going right now, and we want to change.
Okay. So when they're hiring somebody outside or to bring somebody in, like a new school leader, they're looking for a very particular type of leader with a very particular type of skill set to address this thing, right?
Sometimes, or sometimes people just say, we want change. And you see in the last person that we had, and we're going to try something else.
Got it. Okay. Okay.
The ball and see if it sticks. So
All
I
right.
think that sometimes, yes. And I think in most of those cases, people, when something's not going well, like people will make their own narratives around why.
Yeah.
This is going well because, and a lot of times this isn't going well because this person didn't have this experience. So here's a person who has this experience. So we're going to hire this person who has this specific experience because this is going to make it go better. And I think that anytime someone wants change, again, it's just like change is hard. Change is really hard for everybody. Sometimes I feel like kids are the best at it. Like kids are the most adaptable and they're the ones who can like manage change better than oftentimes the adults can. Because adults are a lot more set in their ways and a lot more comfortable with how things are. And when you start to shake that up, it can be really difficult.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Okay. So I just kind of wanted to make sure that was a different or had that clear in my mind. Okay. So come full circle. And now in 2021, you found Compass Collegiate Academy in Charleston, South Carolina. So for the listeners, we've now made it to our fourth state. Okay. And a second opportunity to found a school, which again is not a chance too many leaders get to have, or maybe want to have. If we go back to like the work it takes to found a school, I mean, it's frenzied. But you've chosen to go that path and you get a second chance. So, but your life looks very different at this point when you're founding this second school because you've had your first son and he's right at a year or close or right. I mean, 1 years old, right
Yes.
before opening the doors of
Turned
CCA.
1 as soon as we moved to Charleston. Yeah, I'm crazy. I mean, it's wild. I mean, you got to be a little bit crazy to do this work, but but I think in a good way. And I will say it's one of those things that, after having the experiences that I've had, like there have been times in my life where I'm like, I need just to like not be in charge of this much right now. And then there are times where I'm like, you know what? Like I'm up for this again. I've got this energy again. And I think that COVID also kind of I'm such an extrovert. Like I looked forward to those Zoom calls so much. Like Zoom saved me during COVID because I need people. I thrive off people. I get energy from being around people. So like being in a school with lots of people, like fills me up and I love it. And so, and then basically right around when COVID was starting, like around November of, I guess, 2019, I got a random message on LinkedIn saying, hey, we're looking for someone to start this school in Charleston. I had never been to Charleston. I didn't do much about it. I think I randomly mentioned it to Tim like a month later, and he was like, "Why don't you look into that? That could be great." And I was like, "I don't know. Like, I've never been to Charleston." He's like, "Charleston's cool," and I was like, "Oh, it's by the beach. This is great. It's really warm."
Sounds great.
But in DC, I was so close to my family because my parents were an hour south, my sister is in Philly. And so I was like, well, we're all right here. They can come see us on the weekends, and this is nice. But when I started to think about things opening back up and we started going back to work, and my commute, my 11-mile commute home was an hour and a half plus.
Yeah.
Most days during rush hour when all the cars were on the road, I was like, okay, this might not be the lifestyle that I want when I have an infant. So started, exploring this, message back on LinkedIn. And I think it was in January, I came down for an interview, and it hadn't gotten above 30 degrees in DC for like 2 straight weeks. And it was nice and 75 and sunny on an afternoon that January day in Charleston. And we had lunch outside, and I was like, oh,
That's
this is
lovely.
really nice. And then also just learning about the educational landscape in Charleston and thinking about, the opportunity that existed to create something really great. And also thinking about my own kids, right? At that point, I had one, not two. Now I have two, but, thinking about like, what does this mean for my own children, and where are they going to go to school? And what does that look like? And going from, kind of middle to high to middle to elementary, now I'm like, okay, well, now I'm in a space where like my kids, when they get a little bit older, can come to school with me. And how cool is that to build a school for our community, like, and my kids.
Yeah.
Uh, and so that was exciting. And yeah.
So thinking about the founding experience overall, how did it feel different from Grizzlies Prep?
Grizzlies Prep was almost much more of like an emotional roller coaster because we were denied when we first approved for our charter. Um, they we had no idea. And I don't know if you know this, Missy, but when we first applied for Grizz, like everyone was like, you're good. The school board's gonna approve you. You'll be good to go. Well, we got denied, and we were not expecting it to get denied because that was the year they just had way more schools apply for charters than they ever had. And they kind of were like, whoa, we weren't expecting all these schools.
Yeah.
Everyone got denied. So according to state law, the state treasurer could overturn that, but there was no timeline in which he had to make a decision. So I just started doing yard work for a while and got a dog, and didn't know. And then it was February. It was February that year. So like I was planning, but like planning kind of slowed, and the board was like, we don't know if you're going to have a job. We don't know if we're going to have a school. We'll see. And so founding Grizz was like very fraught with like this, like, oh my gosh, are we actually going to have a school? And I
Yeah.
remember talking to Parker, and I remember talking to some of our other founding teachers and being like, hey, we might have the school, we might not. But it all came together and worked out. Um,
Yeah.
I think I had 16 months in terms of a runway for founding Grizzlies Prep, and the awesome experience to train in a cohort with the Building Excellence Schools fellows. And so getting to visit other high performing schools, talk to their leaders, like that was instrumental and like super inspiring and motivating, and like really helped shape so much of what Grizzlies Prep became. And fast forward to Charleston, like there was none of that planning time.
Hmm.
We had, I think the only reason I came on board, because I was like, all right, this is really, really tight. It's 5 months from the time that I started to the time the school literally opened. The board here had been sitting on just trying to find us a building and a school leader, and basically found us both in the same month. And that was in February of the year that we opened. So February of 2021. So at that point, then I accepted the job, winding down Achievement Prep in DC, ramping up in Charleston, selling my home, staying with my parents for a little bit, staying with my sister for a little bit, buying a home in Charleston. We bought sight unseen. If you can't tell, we're not a very risk averse family. It's great. Like I could not have found a better house and better location in Charleston. Love where we are. But, meanwhile, we're moving, and then my husband leaves town for 5 months for his job 3 days after the moving truck arrives here in Charleston. And so then we just went. Our board chair had a lot together, a lot of things already in place here in Charleston, which was very helpful. So like drafts of handbooks, like overall policies and procedures, and like kind of those big picture structures that can take a long time, but already had, like a first draft of those things done. So that was really helpful. And I was like, all right, if we've got that, then like we can do the rest. And so it was hire, get the right people on the bus and get moving. And I mean, we did it. We even had a staff change that we made like 2 weeks before school started. I mean, we had 3 teachers.
Oh my
Um,
word.
it worked out great, but I think having been through it before a second time around, yeah, I was like, okay, like I've been in these waters before.
Yeah.
Like I know how to navigate this with maybe like a little less personal anxiety than I have in the past. And I think just this whole idea of like success and failure and like what that means is like, like we're going to make this work. Like there's no way around it. Like it's going to work, but also like not being so fearful of if it doesn't work that then cripples your current work ethic
Yeah.
and situation.
Yeah. That's wild. I'm, not for me, but not surprised, right? Like again, I have not worked with you since having kids, and you have two now, but like I'm confident that you are still you founded and are leading a strong school and providing a quality education for your students, because it's just not in your nature to do anything less. Like it's really not. And that's interesting, and I think adds a beautiful layer too. It's like you want this to be a school for your kids as well, right? Like which does pull in that like it's personal, right? Like it's a personal mission now, and beyond just the community in which you are now invested in and serve. But it's like, no, this is actually going to impact my own home, and I want to make sure it's high quality for them. So, um, okay. That being said, you are a mom now, right? And so the ways in which you lead and what you are able to give to your school I would assume, has to look different than it was pre-kids, right? So what differences have you seen in yourself and maybe your leadership style now that you are a parent?
Yeah. I mean, I think I lead a much more balanced life. I probably devote less time to my work at school than I did when I was at Grizz. But I like always tell myself, like, if I am well, my school will be well.
Yeah.
And I think a lot about the narratives that we tell. And there's it's so important to like have that balance and have boundaries while also making sure that like you take responsibility for the things that you need to do and like get your job done. And like you can do it all. Like, is it challenging? Yeah. But like it becomes really important to prioritize and say, like, what are the things I absolutely have to get done today? And like, what are the things that like I can delegate to somebody else, or like we can wait until later to like have this done? Like, what is actually most important here? I think a lot about communication. I think I probably think a lot about parent communication more than I had previously. We also had an interesting situation. The building that we're in now, sorry, nope, the building that we started in at Compass was not built in time for us to start. So our lease started June 1st, but the building actually wasn't completed. And like we didn't have a certificate of occupancy, even a temporary certificate of occupancy until like the end of August. So when we started a school, keep in mind, these are kindergartners and first graders. These are little ones' very first experience with school ever
Yeah.
for a lot, right? And we're telling them, hey, this is a brand new school. We have no track record. We have no proof of anything. And by the way, our building's not ready. So we're actually going to put your kids on a bus in the middle of COVID and take them to another location. And then we're going to bring them back. So you can still pick up and drop off in the same place. Silver lining, 5 and 6 year olds love getting on a big yellow school
I
bus.
mean, yes.
But like we literally, like teachers were calling every single parent in their class being like, hey, so actually we're still not ready to be in our building. We're going to be here. We went to the aquarium. We went to a church. We had school. We were taking moving trucks and like taking like desks and like you do what you got to do to like make sure that like your responsibilities are met, right? And like those are times where like, yeah, are we balanced? No. Why? Because we got to have school on Monday and we got to figure out where it's going to be and we got to take all the desks and chairs there. Like there's a lot of operations that go into all that. Like our student files in like a chip box. It was like because we're just porting,
Yeah.
going where we got to go, doing what we got to do until we can move in. And so there's like always all those unforeseen things. But at the end of the day, like I think like especially with that, like that communication has to be so strong. Like those relationships that you build with families and each other are critical because you're going to go through hard things together. And it's really easy to have a narrative when things don't go the way you expect that is negative or accusatory. And it's also really fun when you've gone through those hard things together. And you have those relationships as a result that can become stronger. And conflict is always an opportunity either for your team to grow stronger, your team to go weaker. And if you address it appropriately, which is usually the harder thing to do, your team will grow stronger as a result.
Um, yeah, that's amazing. I did not realize that. That's a lot. Um, Okay, so you mentioned communication, you mentioned delegation, which I love that word because I know it's so difficult for leaders in general, but I can imagine it's even harder for founders, right? Because it's like the vision, the mission, everything is so ingrained in your brain and it lives here first. And to try to get that out and to get people on the boat rowing in the same direction is a constant battle. But are there any other strategies or tools, things like that have allowed you to maintain that high level of effectiveness that existed at Grizzlies when you had more time and capacity, and now you're scrunching all of that into a smaller time frame, right? Like you just have fewer hours to give to it. Like what beyond, like I said, beyond communication and delegation, what other strategies or tools are you using to maintain that high level of effectiveness or those high standards for yourself?
I think talking to other leaders is really important and having a network of other people that you can learn from. I think is one thing of like I'm always learning and always learning from others. That's really great. I think also like when I was at Grizz, I didn't really give myself time to think because I was just like go, 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 go. Whereas
Mm.
I take time to think now. And sometimes that comes because I'm on an evening walk with my family, right? And I try to be engaged with my family and like take that time every evening. Um, but I think just like taking that time to like reflect and think and like do the things that you need to like fill yourself up and make sure that you're energized. I also use AI to do first drafts and to generate ideas for a lot of things.
Wow.
Um, it's never a final product, but it very often can be helpful if there is a larger task that I need, whether it's like analyze this document and pull the important information out for me, or create a rubric for evaluating X, Y, and Z, or like
Love
there's
that.
so many things that you can just type into Chat GPT and do that. Also, like in my personal life, there are a lot of other things that I just outsource whenever I can. Like if I have the funds to outsource, like I will outsource because if it does not bring me joy, like that my husband loves to cook
Yeah.
and cooks for us and does all the meals and all the meal prep and all of those things. Like it's lovely. I don't have to take up mental capacity thinking about that.
Yeah.
Like I can outsource cleaning my house to somebody else. I can outsource when I was starting Compass childcare. I had found an amazing person, Autumn Yuji, and she is like a part of our family.
Yeah.
But she was working like 60 hours a week. And a lot of times I'd still take time to like have lunch with Quincy or do things with Quincy or go on a walk or go to the playground, but like having her there. So like I wasn't trying to figure out like how do I care for my child and also start a school at the same time.
Yeah. I think that's a great transition for us when thinking about sustainability because that is so tricky. And I'm actually really impressed at how you've managed to, you a lot of times people get burned out or like, when you needed to leave Grizzlies prep, it could have been your exit. I mean, you could have at that point been like, and I'm out, right? Like I'm going to leave education, but you didn't. What you did was, hey, you know what? I don't have capacity right now to do another founder level work, right? But I want to stay in education and I'm going to do these other roles that I have the energy for, like I have the capacity for, I have the, whatever it is, but I get to still be connected to the work. And then, hey, guess what? Now my cup is full. Like I have the energy again, I have the idea again, whatever it is, I can now go back to that school founder leader role again, which I think is just a testament to the fact that like this clearly is your passion is education and it's a love for you and you're able to find the joy in it. But I think you've also managed to find in like listening to yourself to say, right now I have to say no to this type of role because or I have to say no to how I did this role in the past because it doesn't work for me anymore. And if I want to stay at doing this work, I'm going to have to outsource. So, which I love it. I tell Parker all the time, I'm like, I don't care what our financial situation is. I will forego lots of things to never have to lose my house cleaner because I hate it. Like, I don't want to do it. So I need to outsource that forever, which means I don't get to buy new clothes for the next 10 years.
Right.
I will not do it. I don't need to buy another blouse. So, okay. So what you mentioned going, I love that, like filling yourself up, right? Like finding that time, like you mentioned, you water polo and you do, that's helping you build that balance. Are there any other, whether it's practices or habits that you've built into like your daily rhythm to allow for you to maintain effectiveness and enthusiasm as a school leader to prevent that burnout for yourself?
I really enjoy spending time with my kids.
Yeah.
And I know that's also not true for everybody, and like that's okay if that's not true for you. But like for me, that brings me lots of joy. And so like I love spending time with my kids. So in the evenings, if I get a call from a parent 3 times in a row, or there's like a fire, like a big fire, like, you know, I'll take a call if I need to, but 95% of the time, when I go home, I'm home with my family.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I spend time with them. And a lot of times it's just like building magnetiles or going for a walk to the playground or, eating dinner or walking to get ice cream, like
Yeah.
doing things like that. Like,
Yeah.
what do my kids want to do? All right, great. Let's do that. And then when it's time for bed, to be honest, sometimes when I put my 1-year-old to bed, I fall asleep too. Um, but I also know that that morning time for me is a really productive time. So like this morning I was up before 5 a.m. and that gave me time to like pick up some things from yesterday, to respond to some emails. I'm big on also like send later on Gmail because
Oh,
like,
thank you.
yeah, I don't want to send an email at 4 o'clock in the morning, or maybe my baby wakes up at midnight and I don't want to send an email at midnight, but I'm up and I can either lay in bed awake or I can like work for 30 minutes and then I'll get tired again and fall asleep.
Yeah.
And so schedule send. It's
Yeah.
beautiful. Send it for 7 a.m.
Yeah.
Good to go. So I think just like little things like that. And just telling someone, like, hey, is it an emergency? Can I just reach out to you tomorrow? Great.
Yeah.
And
And I
then
bet
just
your team
feeling that.
appreciates it.
Oh, and also on your phone with Siri, just be like, hey, remind me to do this at this time.
Yeah.
Because people catch me all the time in the middle of all the things, but I've always got my phone on me. So I can always just hit the side button and say, like, hey Siri, remind me to do this at this time, to take this time, to pack this tomorrow morning at 6 a.m., to do this thing, call somebody at noon. Like, so it just pops right up and it's like, oh, yeah, great, I can do that. Am I good at that all the time? Nope. But I do it a lot and it's helpful.
What do they say? Progress over perfection,
Yeah.
or whatever. It's like, yeah, it's great. Well, you've answered my next kind of thoughts, which was the 1 to 2 tips. And I think you laid it out beautifully for people of just find the areas of joy. Know when you work your best and are most productive. For you, it's in the mornings. That sounds terrible to me, but kudos to you. Using AI or Siri reminders, I'm like, look at you, little techie. Like, just, yeah, use it. You got it. And then, I mean, I'm calling this out for people because I wish more people would use it, is that send later feature of Gmail. I think it just communicates really great things for your team. It says, I don't need to work. Like, just because I'm sending an email at midnight doesn't mean you do, right? Like, but if you are sending things at those odd off business hours, your team starts to create, like, feel that energy and feel like they have to do the same to meet their leader. And I think what you've done is a gift for your team to be able to say, no, like, emails and things don't need to be answered at midnight or 4 a.m. just because I'm up. So, okay. So I have one final question. You know, like I said, I think it's easy for leaders to really forget why they love this work. But when they're operating within their giftedness, they really do experience, I think, a lot of joy. And I believe every school leader has their own superpower when it comes to their role within their organization. So I would like to know what you think your superpower is as a leader. And it can only be one. And why would you say that's your superpower?
I would say know your people
Okay.
would be my superpower. And I think there's a lot that comes from that, of if you have to change something, or you know, there's so many things that are going to change from year to year. There are so many decisions that you make as a leader, from hiring to placement to rostering to all of these things. And I think just like knowing your people is so helpful in everything. And then that allows you to plan effectively for each person, and hence your team, and make sure that you're providing the supports and structures and guidance that your team needs so they can be their best selves. Because like, if they're their best selves, and like, our school is going to thrive.
I love that. I love that. All right. Well, I have one final question for you as we wrap up, and it's in the spirit of my company's name. What is one box, big or small, that you hope to check off today?
You didn't put this one on the pre-work.
I do that strategically.
One thing that I'm going to check off today. So I have someone who I really want to bring on the team. But there's some pieces that need to move to make that happen. And so I'm hoping to have all those conversations that need to have to hopefully facilitate that today.
It's a great one. It's a big one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Elizabeth, thank you so much for talking to me today and taking time out of your summer to talk to me. And I'm going to be keeping my eye on y'all's school and just in those little boys. And I just, I appreciate you staying committed to the work, and, like I said, maintaining your high standards in all areas. So I hope you're finding time to sleep.
Actually, that's a big change. I sleep a lot.
So proud.
I used to not. I sleep so much.
Good.
It's so wonderful. I love sleep.
Yes.
Oh, that's another superpower though, is like I can actually like turn my brain off and sleep.
Good. That is a superpower.
And that's not something a lot of people can do, especially when you have a lot of things on your mind and a lot of, so I appreciate that about myself too. But I'll say all those same things right back at you, Missy. Thank you for staying in the work and just having that high bar of excellence and helping schools and kids thrive all over the nation.
Thanks. Thanks so much. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks.
Bye. Thank you all for listening to today's Pro Series conversation. Our team is always looking for more pros to learn from in the field of education. So if you have a recommendation for a future guest, or maybe you are the pro, then send us a note at info@checkboxpro.com. And if you want to hear from more pros, then like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so that you don't miss an episode. And by doing so, this also helps more folks find our show. So take a moment to check that box off your list today.